Hi friends, today I am going to be talking about a novella written by Brandon Sanderson. It takes place on Scadrial, and I am happy to say that that book is Mistborn Secret History. Let's jump in. I want to preface this by saying, as the word secret is in the title, it's kind of emphasized that this is going to be a spoiler-heavy review and discussion, so if this is something that you don't want to be spoiled for, if you're new to the Cosmere, and if you're new to Mistborn, or you think one day, hey, I might read Mistborn, I would suggest you skip this video. If you don't really care about spoilers, then that's something you can dive into. An interesting thing on spoilers, if you're curious about data as to whether or not spoilers ruin books or movies or shows for us or everything like that, my friend Bookborn did a really interesting discussion on that on her channel. I will link that here. Let's jump in. We are back on Scadrial, and we are back with our favorite protagonist. I assume it's most people's favorite protagonist. He's not necessarily my favorite character in all of the Mistborn sagas, but he's definitely one of the most endearing, and he pulls you into the story. He's the very opening of the book, and this character is Kelsier. Kelsier has gone to the other side, one might say. And it's interesting because in the original 3 books of Mistborn, that being Mistborn the Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages, Kelsier dies at the end of the first book, and we understand that this has actually been planned by Kelsier. It's in order to help elevate him to a messianic type status, and this does actually work. The Church of the Survivor is something that is very steady throughout the next 2 books. Anne has a really hard time understanding her role in the greater schematics of how Kelsier had kind of built up this idea, but that's besides the point. He dies and he wakes up and he's not really sure where he is, but he sees people kind of puffing in and out. And he's greeted by this figure who is questionable, is telling him to move on. Kelsier says, no, I don't want to do that. We understand very quickly that this is preservation. And one of the things I really liked about this book is that we get into deeper nuances specifically for preservation. I feel like it's less so for Ruin, because Ruin kind of asserts his personality in Hero of Ages with his encounters with Vin. Preservation, we learn relatively quickly on in this book, has actually died quite a while ago and sacrificed himself in order to create the Well, aka Ruin's prison. But I thought this was really interesting because I can't remember if it was Well of Ascension or Hero of Ages, we see the physical form of preservation collapse and die in this field, and that was when I thought preservation actually died. Turns out, no. We've been wrong this whole time. One of the things that this book does is it gets really lore heavy, and I love this. But before we get to that, let's go back to our main man, Kelsier. With Kelsier, he decides he can't move on. He has a purpose, he has a role, his friends, he needs a crew in the afterlife in order to ensure that Vin is gonna be okay, that Marsh, even though they weren't that close, is gonna be okay because he's become an inquisitor, and how horrible of a fate, and that all of his friends are gonna make it through this. Kelsier dies before the fall of the Emperor because he is slain by the Emperor, but soon realizes that Vin has succeeded. She's killed him because he encounters the essence or spirit of the Lord Ruler, excuse me, not Emperor, Lord Ruler. They're kind of one and the same. I think evil Emperor, so that's kind of where I'm going with it. Tells Kelsier that basically they've doomed themselves before walking on, and Preservation kind of agrees with him. Preservation and the Lord Ruler had an agreement basically where the Lord Ruler was gonna take on the Well of Ascension once more and was gonna assume the power and not relinquish it in order to keep Ruin in prison. All of this plan is kind of blown up when Vin goes, gotcha, and I'm gonna, take the Well of Ascension for myself. Kelsier learns that Ruin has been building up Vin for this specific purpose. One of the things that Sanderson does that's really brilliant in this book is that all of these things that you saw at the end of the first book, throughout Well of Ascension and in Hero of Ages, are clicking now. They're starting to make sense, and you go, oh, that's what that was. That was Kelsier intervening, specifically at the Well of Ascension when Elend is stabbed in the stomach and ingests the bead, and he himself becomes Mistborn. We get to go on this crazy wild adventure with Kelsier, and it's so fun. One of the things I will say, and people can get very particular about the order in which you are supposed to read Cosmere books. This is not really my thing. I'm still new to it, but hey, I can see why people might feel this way. One of the things I will say before reading this book is obviously you should read Mistborn Era 1, but I would also recommend possibly reading Elantris. I found that it was really cool when reading this book that there were connections, and I was like, oh, I get that. I understand that, and was able to pick up on it. And that was the first time that I kind of had this like, whoa, Cosmere experience, and I really loved that while reading this book. It was endearing, and it just made me want to keep reading, even though the book itself is not that long. You can see, I think it's less than 300 pages. Oh, significantly less, 227 pages, significantly less. You can read this book in an afternoon if you want to sit down and commit to it. It's a fast read, but a really fun read nonetheless. Honestly, I loved diving back into this world. I loved getting more time with Kelsier, but the thing I liked best was the grand Cosmere lore that we got in this book, which was awesome. We come to understand that there is was a figure who was this deity, and he is shattered into 16 shards, and the shards are beings with abilities like ruin and preservation that have fled to different planets within the Cosmere. The planet of Scadrial is inhabited by preservation and ruin, and preservation is dying and or has died, and we come to realize that shards can die, and this is something that Kelsier doesn't really quite understand what's going on, but I have a feeling that maybe Kelsier will become a shard later. I don't really know. This is my hypothesis going forward, but we'll see. I really love digging into the lore of this story. I thought it was really fun. It brought me in. I enjoyed this book, honestly. I gave this story 4 out of 5 stars. Highly enjoyable afternoon read, especially having read the Mistborn Era 1 books not that long ago. I've read them, Elantris, Warbreaker, Way of Kings, and this book since December of 2022. It's now March, so it's been a lot of Sanderson in a short period of time, but this book was kind of the pièce de résistance on top. It was very enjoyable. Had fun reading it. Highly recommend. If you want to follow along, you can hit like and subscribe. Also, I want to know, were you jazzed to have more time with Kelsier? Were you surprised that Kelsier was brought back to life? I've got to say, I wasn't really surprised. It's kind of one of those things in fantasy now that you assume with a lot of different books that characters are going to come back to life, and Kelsier definitely had that vibe for me, so I wasn't too shocked. It was enjoyable, but I wasn't all that surprised. Let me know if you were. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Fantasy Awash, and as always, I will see you next time.